Welcome everyone to Small Space Gardening, a session that forms part of Renew's newly expanded Sustainable House Day program. My name is James King and I work on events and communications here at Renew. And today I'll be filling in for Rob McLeod, our Policy and Advocacy Manager, who is unfortunately not feeling great at the moment. I want to begin our session this evening by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the respective lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. Renew is committed to honouring Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples' unique cultural and spiritual relationships to the land, water and sea, and their rich contributions to society. I also recognise that we have people tuned in from all over the country today, from a wide variety of traditional lands. Today, I am dialing in from Wurundjeri land of the Kulin Nations. We would love to know where you're tuning in from today, so please feel free to share this with us by using the chat function. I'm so excited to be hosting a discussion with a fantastic panel of renters, gardeners, and horticulturists, and all-round wonderful people. Together, we will be exploring the topic of how to get involved in gardening in your rental, what the first steps are, what you should be wary of, and what you need to tell your landlord about. As a renter living in Melbourne, it's an area I've always been so interested in, but have been so reluctant to follow just because I'm not exactly sure how to go about it and what the first steps are. So I'm hoping to learn just as much as you. This event is the third in our Sustainable Renters Week series, running through until tomorrow. If you missed the previous sessions, we covered how to get your landlord on board and how to improve the efficiency and comfort of your home. These will be made available on our YouTube channel, so we'll be sharing the links shortly. I just wanted to also give a shout out to our wonderful sponsors who without this event would not be possible. These include NAVAS, Bank Australia, Design for Place, Your Home, Lighthouse Architecture and Science, Sonnen, Design Matters, Marybeck Council and Banyule Council. We thank them all so much for their support. We're joined by an excellent panel tonight who bring such a wide-ranging birth of knowledge, lived experience and a ton of fantastic ideas. We're so lucky to have them with us. Firstly, I want to welcome Jessica Perini. Jess works as an editor and a writer by day, specialising in sustainability projects, but she spends every other waking moment on her passion, permaculture. Jess earned her Permaculture Design Certificate through Milkwood in 2010, and later her Certificate IV and Diploma through TAFE. She teaches and facilitates courses and runs working bees at her local community garden and is a regular farmhand at the Sydney City Farm. Previously, she designed and ran gardens and programs for vulnerable communities, including asylum seekers. You've done some awesome stuff, Jess. Thanks so much for joining. And Milkwood are incredible. They did a presentation at Renew not too long ago on growing mushrooms in boxes, which was awesome for renters. It was a great session. You can check that out on our YouTube too, if you like. Next up, we have Nana Anna, also known as the Urban Nana. Anna is founder and creative director at The Urban Nana, which is theurbannana.com, an educational business that specializes in teaching traditional skills, crafts, and methods of living set in framework of a modern day world. As well as reviving traditional ways of foraging, cooking, preserving, and crafting, she focuses heavily on permaculture and living a sustainable lifestyle as a renter in suburban Australia. Anna completed a diploma of horticulture at Melbourne University in Burnley before leading sustainability education as vice principal at a 5-star sustainable school in Victoria. Following that, she completed the Complete Urban Farmer qualification at Ceres, which is just in Brunswick East, near where I'm coming from, and Milkwood Permaculture's final in-person permaculture living course in Hepburn. Thank you so much for joining us, Anna. Anna also has worked in educational and consulting spheres for over 2 decades. She believes that positive environmental and cultural change is possible and infinitely more obtainable if we work together as a supportive global neighbourhood. It's hard to argue with that logic. Thanks, Anna, for joining us. You're a real example, I think, of a renter that's done a lot of incredible things. So we're super grateful to have you with us today. And then finally, we have Gregory Lorenzuti. Greg is a Brazilian-Australian artist and food grower working in the spaces of photography, dance, and organic agriculture. He is a graduate from the School of Nature and Climate at Ceres in urban organic farming and regenerative landscape. In 2020 and 2021, he worked for the Ecological Justice Hub with its food relief production and distribution in the Marybeck City Council area through food grown locally at Faulkner Food Bowls in Melbourne. He's super passionate about the land, practicing urban farming and organic agriculture in order to give back to nature. As a migrant, Gregory believes that working with the land and growing organic food through non-violent and ecological methods reflects directly in the questions about belonging and identity. It also speaks about the transience in performance, plant life cycle, and image making to reinform his long-term practices as a photographer, dancer, and farmer. Thanks so much for joining us, Greg. I'm so glad what a fantastic panel we have tonight. Alrighty, so let's get started. During this discussion, I'll be putting viewers' questions to our panel. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted a question when signing up in the registration process. Those questions help us formulate the agenda for tonight, which is great. There's still plenty of time to ask a question, so I encourage anyone who has one to put them in the Q&A box, which should be at the bottom of your screen. We'll make sure we get to many as we can. You can also use the chat function on the bottom right of the screen to make general comments or to contact our behind the scenes team with any problems. That would be great. Alrighty, let's jump in. So the first question we have today, and I'll just throw this out to anyone who wants to answer it, is what does gardening in your rental home add, and why should I consider it? What do I need to tell my landlord about? But maybe we can break that down into a few different questions. Do I have a taker for that first one?
How long is a piece of string? what it adds to, I think about gardening in terms of a yield. So a very permaculture sort of basis is to think about obtaining a yield. And most people, when they first start permaculture, think that's just getting a harvest from, fruit or veggies or flowers or something like that. But I like to think about those marginal sort of edge yields that you might get, the enjoyment from watching something grow from seed, or the actual, the physical and mental health you get from boosted vitamin D from being outdoors instead of inside a, a warehouse or an office all day. But, there's things like satisfaction of just watching something grow. It makes you feel accomplished. So, you are boosting mental health in that way by giving yourself a feeling of, doing a good thing. But there's also things like in a rental where you don't have much control over perhaps insulation, those sorts of things. Having a garden surrounding your property can actually help moderate the temperature. So you can create cooler zones outside of, known hot windows, or create living shade by planting beans or pumpkin or something like that that's going to climb up outside a hot window in summer. So you can get things like that to add a bit of value and add a different yield of your enjoyment of the property, and also just increasing biodiversity. So for me, that's a really big thing that's worth everyone in urban spaces particularly to do whatever you can to make corridors for biodiversity to thrive, because we will all suffer if it disappears.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so many good points touched on just then, sort of looking at it super holistically. What about you, Greg? Why do you think people should consider creating a garden and getting into permaculture in their rental?
Yeah, well, I would second actually Anna when she said the creation of a small biomes around us, and with urban development, the wild corridors have been completely broken, for obvious reasons, removal of native vegetation, construction roads and infrastructure that we as human beings, we need and we love and we want that around us. Makes our life easier. However, there is a cost to that. And I think in a way of us, we need to balance that out, somehow. And sometimes when you think you, as a renter, you don't belong to a place because you are always on a move. You're always thinking you're here today, but maybe next year your contract is gone and then you're going to be somewhere else. So you don't actually create any roots to your local biosphere. And when we, in this conversation, it's been happening for quite some time now, especially after the pandemic, during the pandemic, we're still in it, is how can we create a sense of a local, movement? It's a local economy, it's a local currency, it's a localized relationship with your neighbors. And I think gardening, and in any capacity, if you want to either create a garden that's for you and your family, if you want to grow food, or if you want to work with native plants and eventually create a wild corridor for wildlife, and that's also going to bring joy to you, but not only to you, but also to a wider community of living organisms. They are here with us. They're cohabiting, you know, with us, a constant, and we need them to. So there are many possibilities of, ways of gardening and how you can approach that. But I would say there is always a garden for every place. There is a garden for every place, no matter. You could be in a unit right up on, the 12th floor of a building, and there is a garden for you there. You just need to find which one is.
Yeah, that's so nice, and I'm sure lots of the attendees now will be happy to hear that. We did have an attendee who actually said that they live on the 12th floor of a balcony, so they'll be particularly happy. There we are. But yeah, lots of people, lots of renters with a variety of sort of different spaces that they wanted to know if they can use. So that's good to know. Yeah, that was a very wholesome answer. Cheers, Greg. Jess, it's already been a lot said, but is there anything you want to add to that?
How can I say anything more to that? These guys have been so thorough, but really, all I can really say is to re-say what they've said, really, which is the connection aspect of gardening. It's not really about, you'll get a few carrots, you might get some spinach, you'll get bits and pieces, but it's the connection factor that's really important. And not only just us connecting to the plants, but connecting to the weather, connecting to the soil, connecting to the cycles of spring and summer and winter. And you can garden in all of these seasons. I used to just think, we can just garden in spring and summer, but then I started getting beautiful autumn harvests and I started getting winter harvests, and I was like, whoa, you just start connecting to everything. It's not just about this one little thing. It's about this whole bigger system. And once you start tapping in, it's really exciting.
Yeah,
I love that when you talk about sort of connecting with community. That's sort of, we've seen a lot of those community share boxes or honesty stalls and those sorts of things cropping up as well. I think, like we know, when you're a gardener, you meet another gardener, you won't shut up. You will just continue talking. So if you become a gardener as a renter, you are kind of almost immediately opening this door to other people in your local community. And, whenever I move into a new property, the first thing I do is go over to the immediately surrounding neighbours and just knock on the door. It might be a jar of jam or some cordial or something like that, and say, "G'day, just letting you know I'm me and I'm here." And that then sort of, it's incredible how much the yield of community connection to me actually saved me throughout lockdowns, because I live alone, and just knowing that, when we weren't allowed outside for more than an hour a day, knowing that I can wave to 7 people out of the window, maybe some of them I've swapped produce with or swapped seeds or something like that. That yield, I think, is a really, really important one to me too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially through COVID, that would have been such an important community to have, sort of sharing that. My neighbour, when I moved into my current rental in Milkwood, he just has like 200 rosemary bushes, and I get like at least 2 kilograms of that every week. And now I would almost feel rude taking it away, like turning it away, but it's a good thing. We have lots of like roasted potatoes with that rosemary.
He's probably hugely thankful to you for taking some.
I think I'm helping him as well, but like, it's like, I think, I haven't, to be honest, I should probably give him back a bit more. I bought him a Snickers bar once, but I can take it to the next step, maybe start growing something to give him. But the second element of that question is, like, what do I need to tell my landlord about? And I think maybe we don't need to answer that directly now, because we're going to sort of talk about gardening and permaculture techniques that are savvy for the renter. But is there anything going into the session that anyone sort of wanted to talk about there, more generally?
I've seen people talk about the two sort of camps of discussion with your landlords. There's a huge number of people who talk about asking for forgiveness instead of permission, because for such a long time the rental market has been skewed really, really heavily towards the landlord. Of course, the landlords need to be taken care of. It is their property and we need to respect that, absolutely. But at the same time, when you talk about people who are going to rent for their entire life, are they not allowed to sometimes do something they'd like to do on the land that they're on? So I sort of sit in that camp of, if I had more people living with me, or a bigger income so I could subsidise time off to prepare garden beds and put them back the way they were at the end of each lease, I might start investing in putting in garden beds. But for me, I kind of err on more of the side of start the discussion really early, even at your rental inspection. Ask the agent if they know if the landlord's going to allow you to put in garden beds and stuff like that. And if you have an open channel of communication, then they're more likely to allow you to do sort of different things within the property. So I don't know if I've gone too in depth there, but
no, you've done fine. I think that's a really good idea, and starting that conversation early is so important. I mean, I think in a way there should probably be like almost an increasing demand from landlords to have renters that are keen on doing this. From my perspective, it just sort of increases the livability and desirability of your home, especially if you're considering keeping that on as an ongoing investment. But Jess or Greg, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I was thinking, like, because when I moved to this rental property where I am in right now, is I worked with a technique that I called, later on I developed a concept called garden seduction. So I took photos of the property the week that I moved in, you know, especially not the house itself, but more like the surrounding of the lawn area. It wasn't a proper lawn. It was just, invasive weeds. And took photos of that, and then I started gardening. As I said, Azana, I didn't ask for a official permission to do the gardening. I was kind of like slowly tapping in and making some progress, and I was taking photos of that progress. So when I have a different relationship with my landlord in the traditional one, the real estate, because I have a direct access to him. So he came for like an inspection, and he was blown away.
Absolutely.
And our relationship completely shifted from that moment on. And I wonder if I had waited before for his permission, if I would ever be gardening, as Anna was saying, would have been given that chance. Or maybe it could be like, oh, I'm not sure, I'll answer you later, and you never get the answer.
Absolutely. I think, and sorry, Jackie, who is working behind the scenes today, just sent me an Instagram photo of your garden. Greg, is it okay if I share that one? Because I feel like everyone should see this.
Oh, that's all right, yeah. It's
okay.
It's listed with Open Gardens Victoria, so it's public garden. I don't say it's private garden.
Okay, sure thing. Anyway, here's beautiful garden. Everyone should check that out. But yeah, I think you raise a really interesting point about the landlord loving what they're seeing, essentially, because it's just adding to the diversity of their home so much, adding to it just makes it look so much more beautiful. Surely that's always a good thing. I'd like to hear from some landlords. If you're a landlord here, you can tell me in the comments if I'm wrong. Okay, Jess, is there anything you wanted to sort of add just on that last?
Yeah, the only I can think of a really good example. Milkwood have a very good example on their blog, Milkwood Permaculture. They went in and they did ask for permission to, it was just complete grass, and the landlord said yes, so long as you return the grass later on when you leave. So they were given permission, and they put in a whole lot of raised garden beds, and they did a beautiful job, and they grew all their own veg in that season and in the following seasons that they were there. I think they're about a year possibly, and then they replaced the grass afterwards. So there's always compromise. There are always ways you can work around things, whether you ask permission, you don't, or there's that seductive method, which I think is wonderful.
I love the seductive method. I'll be trialing that. I'm actually about to move into a new place in Milkwood that has like a garden that looks like it's going to be pretty good, but pretty bare at the moment. So I'll give that a go. I don't expect it to look like that piece of art, Craig, but it will look good. Maybe it'll be okay. It'll be productive, perhaps. Awesome. Well, for the next question, and this is, we sort of touched on it already, but a lot of people wrote in when we gave them the opportunity to ask a question. And they said that they like the idea of starting to grow their own food, but being in a rental can be so precarious, and they're not sure how long they'll be there for. Is it worth the time and investment? Jess, I'll hand this straight to you, because at the moment I'm getting to you last, so I feel bad.
Look, I would say absolutely. You're asking the wrong person to get my answer will never be no. I don't think anyone here will say no. I think it's worth it. It's so worth it. because you can use containers which you can basically take with you when you go. You can use all sorts of pots, wicking containers, wicking beds, veggie pods, all sorts of stuff. I just go nuts, absolutely go nuts. I fill balconies, I would fill any space, and believe in the old myth that says, you know, if certain things don't grow with certain things, I just go crazy, pile it.
Cool, that's permission. Go ahead.
Not very technical answer there, but yeah.
That's okay. That's all right. It's straight from the heart. I like that. And Greg, what do you think? Do you think is it always worth the time and investment? And I guess what are some ways that you can sort of take your garden with you? Jess, you sort of just touched on it by talking about buckets and pots and stuff.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that on the whole, Greg?
100%. I think Jess, you know, she said it really well. And one thing I would add to that is, regardless what you can take with you if you move, you know, to a new property, how much you can take with you, there's two things there. One is the knowledge that you acquired, experiencing and working with plants, it travels with you. You won't live in your home. It travels. It's your asset.
Yeah.
And the only way to build that asset is with practice. You know, you can read all the garden books in the world. You can do all the garden workshops in the world. And you're only going to learn, and we're only going to learn from plants when we work with plants. So, and obviously with soil, most and foremost.
Yes, we'll circle around to soil soon. I know it's a hot topic.
And the other thing is, if you have to leave something behind you, you're living, you create something that's for someone else, and that should be in the back foot. You know, obviously, you know, if you think about the economic reasons, you know, the economic cost of doing that, it's fair to think about, you know, how much money you think you're going to leave behind you. Absolutely. But you don't need to be buying plants. You need to be, you know, like you can make your own compost. You don't need to be buying compost. You can make your own, or you can swap plants, or you can go on, you know, marketplaces everywhere. And there's always, or even, as you know, Anna was saying, knock the door of your new neighbor. He might have like a fruit tree sitting on a corner. He doesn't know what to do with that. And you can rehome it. So, and it happens more often than you can imagine. So it's regardless what you can take with you, the knowledge is your asset. And whatever you leave behind, it's either for someone else or for some other creature that will need that.
Yep, absolutely. And I guess sort of related to that question, we've talked a little bit about cost, and I understand this could vary so much depending on your garden and your produce and your yield. But what can people expect setting up a garden? And maybe it'd be a good opportunity here to talk about maybe smaller balcony gardens and then just general kind of smallish gardens. I don't know if anyone wants to dive in and have a quick go at that one. Yeah, Anna, please.
I've sort of looked at the whole concept of money, and I've had an interesting past, and a lot of that stems from having anxiety and being autistic and living alone as a single person who my income has to cover everything, and my time away from work to do up a garden bed or put the lawn back after I've grown something, that comes out of my income, which then informs my ability to pay rent at the next place. So I've really sort of spent probably the last 10 years calibrating a balance that kind of works for me. So what I've ended up with is most things in pots, and people are sort of like, okay, that's great. You know, you can grow lettuce and salad and those tomatoes in pots and whatever. I've got a quince tree, an apricot tree. I've got banksias for pollinator attractors. I've got all sorts of things. There's rhubarb and asparagus, which takes 7 years to sort of be harvestable. That goes in a pot and it comes with me. So I don't see potted gardening as a barrier. But when I've sort of talked to people about that, they're like, yeah, but pots are expensive. But as Greg said earlier, you've got, you know, all the marketplaces, you've got hard rubbish collections in lots of states and regions. Sometimes they coordinate them and you can know that everyone in a street is going to have everything out. So you can go cherry picking what you need in your property. or, you know, swap, as I said, making your own compost, as Greg mentioned. But even those sorts of things, it's not simple, and there is no one simple answer for everything, because you have to observe and interact with not only the property that you're in, but your life, and all of the elements that play into your life, which inform what you're able to spend. So the resources you can spend are time, money, emotional resource, you know, sort of emotional well-being. So it's a really complex issue, but the answer to it's actually really simple, which is just to kind of look at it, to sit back and actually just look and see where are the issues and what are some possible ways I can work around it. So balcony gardening, like you were saying, for me is that's a great one, just to start with small containers. Start with something you know you're going to eat. So if it's during summer, if it's lettuce, those sorts of things, a packet of lettuce seeds can cost, you know, under $1 if you're buying in a savvy place or swapping with people. Start small and then build up to, you know, once you've gained confidence in one area, then you start to build up and grow more things. So I think that's a sustainable growth of your experience as a gardener. So in terms of cost there, there's no dig gardening. So no dig gardening to fill pots, which a lot of people think isn't possible. If you haven't heard about it, no dig gardening is also known as lasagna gardening. So it's essentially layering carbon and nitrogen material, so green stuff and brown stuff. And a lot of people use that to build garden beds, but you can do the same thing inside pots. So I've written a couple of posts on that. There was one that was on Milkwood's site, which is literally how to build no dig gardens in a pot. I haven't bought soil or compost or manure for about 6 years. So I've filled all of my pots, and I've got about 40 or 50 of them at the moment. Some of them holding fruit trees. They just get filled with the carbon and nitrogen materials I have within my system. So I classify my system as my street. So in autumn, I'm out there raking everybody's front lawn, and I get all the leaves coming. And then I'm suddenly the really nice lady who cleaned up their lawn. So they bring me seeds or things that, you know, oh, do you want some materials for your compost or your worm farm? So it's this, Anyway,
Absolutely.
but I'll fill the pots with straw, leaves, compost, worm castings, and I think I've bought 1 bale of straw in the last 18 months. So that's a cost to grow my garden. It's been a cost of about $16.52. So
that's incredible. So that's looking pretty good. So and I think just on that as well, some of the questions we've had is like, have you found yourself obviously saving money through having produce as well, that you're able to grow instead of buy? I mean, you look maybe a bit dubious about that, but I mean, there's
that
obviously
saying that says, gardening is the best way to spend 10 months at about $40 worth of, you know, materials and equipment to grow $2.70 worth of tomatoes.
I can understand that. I can understand that. That's okay. On the cost front, Greg or Jess?
I just want to say more about costs. When I built my garden, I just thought, okay, I'm just going to get as much as I can for free, just see what I can do. And honest to God, I just kept my eyes peeled, like really peeled. And someone was having an exhibition in Sydney at Carriage Works with soil. And they were trying to build the best organic soil they possibly could. And they made it into an exhibition where people could walk through this organic soil. And I just went, oh, and rang them up and I said, could I just get myself a little bit of that? And they were like, yeah, we've got 68 million tons of it. So then I put the word out to the networks and everyone's like, oh my God. And then I had a look for rocks. Someone was dismantling a house and they were giving away all their rocks. I thought, oh great, I'm going to build some garden walls with some rocks. And then my neighbors were giving away cuttings. I live in a very multicultural neighborhood, so everyone's always giving me lemons and it's wonderful. So I'd say like 80% of my garden is free, and seeds swapped between people, looking out on marketplace for free stuff, as you say, hard rubbish, going out to the street and figuring out. I mean, it's just so many methods of finding free stuff. The other thing I do for free, which is I take guinea pig waste from my neighbours. Anyone who's got rabbits or guinea pigs, I just say, guys, you know, and we do this through Crop Swap Australia. So wherever you are in Australia, there will be a crop swap probably near you. But we also do, you know, has anyone got guinea pig waste or whatever? People are happy to give it up. And we just compost it for 6 months and off you go. So really, you don't really have to spend a lot of money at all. And at the moment, with the price of lettuce, we just decide we'll be sustainable in lettuce this year, and we saved, we got like $1,000 for lettuce. You know, so,
Oh, wow.
you know, it's pretty amazing when you get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I've been getting some comments at the moment, sort of not so much related to cost, but I guess somewhat. But do you have any ideas on how to grow vertically cheaply? And this sort of goes back into a question that we've had from a lot of people, talking about how much actual space do I need to have my own garden, and what do I need to get started? So there's a couple of questions there. Maybe we'll just start off with how much space do I need to have my own garden, and what do I need to get started? And maybe we could focus on balcony gardens, because I guess this is like the whole how long is a piece of string argument. But if we're starting from quite a small garden that someone have on their balcony, what's the requirements there? Are some balconies too small, or does it just depend on what you want to grow?
I think just, yeah, it is what you want to grow, isn't it? I've tried stuff on some balconies and it hasn't worked, but that's because it was literally a small fragile lettuce plant trying to survive amongst a concrete hot pot of, you know, bricks and all that sort of stuff. But once I started letting nasturtiums grow and create a living shade over all of that concrete, then the lettuce was okay because it didn't fry so much. So it was this companion planting kind of thing. But yeah, I think
really,
yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say that's really interesting, because I had, I reckon, 6 or 7 questions from people come through saying that they've tried vertical balcony growing and they've had no luck with it. So I wonder if it might be the same issues you just mentioned, as it being too hot of an area and not enough shade on the plants.
So the current property that I've got now, it's a white weatherboard, and it just has this little heat sink of the courtyard where the afternoon sun just sits in there for sort of 4 hours and fries everything. And because it's white weatherboard, it reflects back off the wall, so it gets the sun coming onto it and then coming back off it. And I had, as a climbing frame, I had picked up from Hard Rubbish some panels of someone's chook pen that they were dismantling. So it's wooden around the edges and then it's got metal mesh on the inside. So it's nice and sturdy. But what I was realising that all my peas and tomatoes, when they were climbing around the metal, they looked like they'd been chewed on sort of every little strip. Turns out they had been fried because the metal in the sun had just gotten so damn hot that it literally layered through the plant. So I just put a piece of shade cloth, again, that I picked up off Hard Rubbish, in between the house and the climbing frame, and then they were fine. So that was just sort of observing it, but it was only during lockdown I noticed that, because I was home during the day when the sun was actually coming into that area, and I didn't know what the problem was before. But so I think Hard Rubbish and Marketplace are my absolute go-tos for climbing frames. It's the stuff that no one wants to move with them when they leave a rent. So compost, worm farms, lattice, and you know, sort of chicken wire is something that, if you, like Jess said, if you know that you need or want it in the future, if you give yourself a couple of months, you're almost guaranteed to be able to pick it up for free.
Yeah, awesome.
I was actually going to ask you that. Would you agree that if you slow yourself down, if you know, go to Bunnings, buy the things today and garden today, if you're prepared to wait for a bit longer, would you agree that that's when the goods start coming your way?
Yeah, absolutely. You just keep your eyes peeled. You're thinking, I'm really going to need some stuff for my compost soon, and you know, if I could just And then all of a sudden things start popping up and you start seeing things, you're like, wow, who would have thought someone would be giving 3,000 tons of soil away? Okay, I'm here, I'm ready.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
So,
it's
yeah.
all out there. People give away stuff all the time. It's just crazy. The other group is Buy Nothing. If you're in your local Buy Nothing group, and if you don't have one, start one, because people constantly moving at this point in time. People are moving overseas, going places. They just can't take their stuff with them, and there's constant source of pots and trellises and all sorts of stuff that people are giving away for free. So yeah, don't hesitate, and just, yeah, like Anna just said, give yourself a little bit of time. Don't just do that instant, I need to have this right now, because
Yeah.
if your eyes open, within days you'll find things.
Yeah, okay. So being attentive and sort of resourceful is what I'm hearing is a great way to get started. But also I'm hearing that there's no such thing as a garden, like too small of a space to garden, providing you have. Okay, awesome. That's good news. That's good
I was
news.
going to say as well, if you do have a space that isn't prime for growing fruit and veg, then perhaps you start looking at the edge of your living space, such as community gardens, or perhaps even looking into foraging for edible weeds. Obviously, non-sprayed areas, that's a whole other ball game, but still, yep. So Jess is just holding up a copy of the book Eat Weeds by Diego Bonetto.
Cool.
It's the one of the two books I didn't have in my book stack. But sort of having a look at edge spaces. So community gardens is a great one. If you don't have space to grow in your own property, perhaps there's an area in your community that you can actually do some growing. Or school gardens. Join a school who's got the Stephanie Alexander cooking program. Go and volunteer there a bit, and you'll often be taking home a bit of the yield of things that get harvested there as well.
That sounds like a bit of a double whammy.
Yeah, something really interesting you just said, and I was thought that is there is always, when you move to a new place, new neighborhood that don't know people, don't know, but just give yourself time, as Jess was saying, and you might find a community garden right around the corner from you, or someone that knows a community garden that's not far from you, or there's your neighbor is a king gardener. There's a program that's being run here in Faulkner, the area where I live in northern suburbs in Melbourne, which is called Backyard Farming, which is an incredible initiative, a local initiative, which is pairing a lot of elderly people. They live in their houses for many, many years, and they are, for many reasons, unable to look after their properties. And they are pairing those families and those couples or single people with young aspiring farmers. So those folks are coming into those properties and looking after and creating an incredible sense of connection within those communities. So there is always a way of gardening. It's not, when we think about gardening, I think the first image we have in our heads is like a flat surfaces or rolling hills. Gardening is 3D. It's 3D. You can grow in any space around and above us. So it's just need to harness the potential in the space that's around us. Knowing a little tricks, join your community garden is a good one. There's always someone that knows a little bit that you can just open your ears and you're gonna learn something. Oh, I never thought about that.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's amazing advice. I've had a few questions as well, once again, sort of related, but when I'm building my garden, how do I plan for extreme weather and pests? Is there a particular way that I should be doing this, or are there multiple ways? I've had a lot of people really interested in sort of how I can do that organically and without causing harm to the environment too, on the pest front, obviously. But does anyone have any sort of tips on that front?
Well, I'm just going to start with one quick thing about pests. If there is nothing eating your garden, you also shouldn't be eating that garden. So it's a matter of balance, okay? So obviously an infestation of a particular pest or, living organism that's there, it could be, microorganism, could be, that could cause, some, like, off balance, let's call that, in your microclimate, in your biome there. So that should be addressed in some ways, organic ways, and there are organic ways of doing that. But also the idea of removing a garden from its creatures is also something that we're being uneducated in food production, that the perfect fruit is that one, that apple that you see in the supermarket that's like incredible, like perfect looking. So that's there's sometimes pests can like take it all and then you have nothing, and that's all. Okay, so I did all this work and now there's nothing left. Well, that's one thing. The other thing is there's something being eaten and you can also have some. So it's sort of sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think it can be so easy now to be so particular over certain fruit and vegetables because we're sold these absolute perfect looking fruit and veg from Coles and Woolies all the time. So it's good to be cautious of that. Yeah,
well, a quick thing is like, I'm going to focus on pests, and maybe Anna and Jess can talk about other things. But one thing that's actually let's talk about insects. How they find plants, their favorite. Like us, we have favorite food. Insects also do. They have their favorite foods. They kind of find things mostly by smell, scent, and silhouette, shape. So that's two ways they can find things. So if we can find ways, as Anna just mentioned, companion planting, like putting the nasturtiums next to the lettuce and other things around, that actually two things: strong smell herbs and different shapes around your favorite edible things, that helps you a lot and make it a bit harder for an insect to find what they like the most, and might just give up and go somewhere else.
That's fascinating. I had no idea. That's awesome knowledge. Thank you for sharing that.
Jess mentioned earlier that you don't just grow, you don't just grow a bit of this and a bit of that. You just put everything in everywhere. And I love that. People may have heard of the concept of food forests, which is very much what Greg's talking about there. In a forest, there is a balance usually between an ecosystem with all the bugs and everything in it. Whereas if you bring out very tasty, fragile lettuce and plant it in rows with 10 centimetres in between each one, the slugs are going to be like, yes, let's go, buffet, here I go. But if you fill in all of the spaces, then, they're going to get confused. They're going to have fewer places to walk across. And a lot of people say, oh, but don't you have to separate you can't plant things too close. So my thinking there is it's very autistic. I am autistic, so I feel like that helps me with gardening, because I'm just like, no, this makes sense, this works. I don't just think of the space above the ground as having different tiers for growing in. So you think about a forest has the canopy, the mid-story and the understory. You can do that with companion planting, but I also think of the area below the soil. The roots also have these different zones of where they suck up nutrients and water from. So if you've got a tree in the middle of a pot and its roots go all the way down to the bottom, it needs most of its nutrients and whatnot from around that base area. And then plant things that require nutrients from the soil a little bit higher up all around it. And then you can even fill the spaces in between that with stuff that have really shallow roots, and they're not going to be out competing each other. And if you do it well, you're going to end up with so much space, like Greg says, that the bugs are just going to be like, oh, I don't know where to go.
Yeah, that's fascinating as well. This is a really interesting topic for me. I didn't know this other thing.
One other thing I was going to add that sort of mirrored what both of you were saying was that Bill Mollison, one of the co-founders of permaculture, he used to say, you don't have an aphid problem, you've got a ladybug deficiency, because ladybirds will eat aphids. So I love that he's not looking at pests as a problem so much as an imbalance in a system. And that's kind of your job as the steward of your plant, kingdom, to kind of help find that balance. And I think just by planting lots of things that will attract lots of different bugs, you'll end up with predatory things. So when I first moved in here, there was nothing. It was bricks and weatherboard, and that was it. And I've now got, I think, over 45 different types of insects, and that's only within 2 years. So I've got, dragonflies, praying mantis, and they do a lot of stuff to help keep other bugs out.
Totally, yeah, that's super interesting. That pretty much answers all that one. Thank you so much. I'm just realised we have 15 minutes left of the session, and I've got through about a third of the questions I want to. So I'm going to start picking up the pace a little bit. But it's been fantastic, sort of going into these in depth as well. I do have a question here that I've had quite a lot, which is lots of people have limited spare time. They might not have a bunch of people to be able to look after the garden. They might have to go to work every day, obviously. How much time do you need to get started with gardening, and how much time do you need to maintain your garden? And I also understand this is like another one of those how long is a piece of string questions, but if there's any guide, we'd be grateful to hear.
I kind of like this. I'm going to talk from a person that has three different complementary careers happening at the same time. So there is no time free. There's no free time, like, you know. So I would say always start from the premise: how much do you think you can dedicate to your well-being? How much time of your life can you dedicate to your well-being? And the answers might vary, you know, what you can actually do, because you need to earn an income to have a life and sustain a family, maybe. Or do you have to shift priorities in your life? You know, like, what is the most important? What is the most important thing for you right now? I think if you can answer that question first, you know, gonna like, okay, I have 2 hours a week to offer to that, and maybe dedicate that to yourself, you know. So you're creating a garden, but also looking after yourself. So, and that could be 10 minutes a day, you know. That's all you got, you know, after dinner or before, I don't know, just, you know, throwing yeah. So I think and it will be a completely different answer every day to you, you know, because the time you have today, it'll be different tomorrow. And how,
Absolutely.
you know, yeah. So kind of like, maybe it's removed from ourselves the pressure of, I need to have that amount of time to do garden, otherwise I can't do it.
Yeah.
And being honest with yourself as well. So actually looking at your time and recognizing, I want to grow tomatoes. I want to grow tomatoes from seed, but is that actually realistic? It only takes 10 minutes to plant the seeds, but do you have that time to water them and to then pop them up in 2 weeks' time? Oh no, that's the busiest time of year for you. Maybe don't plant tomato seeds this year. Maybe go and swap them with someone else or buy them from someone else. You know, so actually being really honest with yourself about not just your time today, but your time in the next 6 months. Is it going to be a burden on you if you plant this one small innocuous seedling right now? Is that actually going to cause you problems in 5 months' time? If it is, maybe you need to find something else to do right now. So yeah, again, that comes from starting small in my head. It's just do what you can, start where you are and use what you've got, you know?
Absolutely. I think that's really great advice. Just being aware of your time and what your time is going to be like in the future, and sort of starting, like you mentioned about starting small as well, which is linked. Another question we've had from a lot of people is, what should I start growing? Like, I'm really eager to get starting with something. I want to start growing, but I don't know what's best. I don't know what's easiest, what's going to give me the largest yield. Do you three have any recommendations? Is it super dependent on location and climate?
Yeah, probably. I think don't plant stuff you're not going to eat. It's pointless otherwise. Like,
that's a good,
the starting point. Don't plant something, you know, that you know is going to grow really well if no one's going to eat it. It's a waste of time, money, resources, and space. So,
totally.
Plant what you love too. Like,
radishes,
love eating something. Go for it, you know, plant 10 different types of tomatoes if that's what you love growing, you know, love eating. Think about what you'll be excited about in the next 6 months.
Because you'll put more effort into that, won't you?
Yeah.
You love it.
Because you really want to go see how they're developing. Like my cucumbers at the moment, they went from this to this in 2 days. Oh my God, it's amazing. So, you know, whatever brings out that spark of enjoyment and passion in you, you know, you got to go for that. And if that's orchids, that's orchids, you know, if that's food. For me, it's food, but for other people, it might be other things. So yeah.
Yeah,
that's what Greg said
that's nice
earlier.
advice.
You learn about plants from being with plants. So if you do the thing you love, then you get good at that, and then you'll learn lessons along the way that are going to help you with maybe the next thing you plant once you've got your confidence up, I guess.
Yeah. So yeah, it's an ongoing process, an iterative learning process. Yeah, and I love the idea of planting what you love, because that's so true. You know, you're going to put the time and energy into that because you love it so much. So I like that approach, instead of looking at what's easiest, looking at what you're going to enjoy the most.
And you want to have a little like pleasure, you know, like you want to achieve something when you start a garden. You want to harvest at least something. And sometimes you failed, and that's okay. I want to show you this. Like this morning, I walk out in the garden and I planted a whole row of beetroots. I was so excited. Well, fantastic. I went today, and that's what I got. 3 baby beetroots. They're going to be my dinner tonight. And I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to enjoy these beets as like nothing else on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, they look really sweet and yummy. I think they'll be good. Sort of going down a bit of a rabbit hole here, but we've had so many questions on soil. So a lot of people have said they're super confused by soil. Do I just grab some potting mix at my local Preston Bunnings and throw in some seeds? What's the best thing to do here? How cautious of soil do I have to be? And Greg, due to your facial expressions at the moment, I'll throw to you first.
Oh, I would say, hang on a sec. Soil, we can make a completely new episode, podcast or something like this, because we can spend hours talking about soil. I know Anna and Jess are going to have lots to share about it as well, because it's once you start unveiling, soil, life and culture, that's when you start really enjoying gardening.
Okay.
And soil is your most precious asset ever. Like, it's something that actually we don't grow. I think, like farmers, we don't grow, plants. We actually grow soil.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we want to grow. Topsoil is the most precious. When people ask me, what are you going to take in like in the Paradise Island, whatever, like in a, isolate, I would take topsoil. That's what I'll take with me.
Yeah. Awesome.
So potting mix, it's a bit of a, can be very tricky. It's what we need to think about soil as a place where microorganisms can thrive and reproduce and do their thing on their own time. Plants will then work with collaboration with those creatures, and they're going to thrive as well. Mm. So the more diversity in your soil, the more healthier your soil and your plants will be. Okay. So always think about there's no one thing that's going to solve it all.
That's super handy. Anna, you look like you would like to say something on soil as well, unless I'm misreading.
Two things, and I'll just say this succinctly. One is what helped me really get soil. Like, there are some fantastic resources out there, and as Greg said, once you really get into it, it's just like a whole other world. It's the same as becoming a marine biologist. You can become a soil biologist, a microbiologist. But for me, that was overwhelming. And so what helped me understand it was to think like a forest. Mm-hmm. The earth has been building soil with zero human interaction for millennia. Trees drop leaves, it rains, they get damp, they break down, animals and insects die on it. That adds carbon and different, nitrogen and all sorts of things. And it just rots down and creates soil. Mm-hmm. So once I kept coming back to that, I'm just like, okay, I want to build the best soil, but have I put too many leaves, or is it too much grass? What am I doing wrong? I just went, hold on, what did the forests do? And so I just started doing that no-dig layering. That's why it works so well for me. And that brings me on to the second point, which is comparing no-dig beds or pots to potting mix. Potting mix to me is basically, I think of it like tan bark with nutrients added into it. Whereas no-dig gardens are lots of different organic materials that, as they age, break down and create soil. Mm-hmm. So in one hand, with potting mix, you are buying soil which depletes itself quite quickly over about 6 months. Or when you build your own organic layers, you're putting in materials that actually create soil, which reduce the need for you to buy things that are going to self-deplete, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. That's both super helpful. Soil sounds very, very important. That's my takeout of the session. Jess, is there anything you wanted to contribute to the soil discussion?
Oh, yeah, we could be here all night. Yeah, I've got lots of soil systems. You just got to bring it all in, whatever you can bring in. I've got heaps of little worm towers in everything. You know, I've got them in pots, I've got them in beds, I've got separate systems. So to make a worm tower, all you need is a pot, just a pot with a lid on it and a brick on top of that, and you can just put in your food scraps. You bury that into your bed or your pot, and then you put a lid on it and you put a brick on it so that no rats can get in, and worms will just come in naturally, eat the food scraps, go out into your beds, go out into your pots, and share all the lovely nutrients with everything. So that is a really, really super simple system which you can do for $0 and benefit your soil and benefit your beds, your plants, and your health and everything. So whatever you can do to improve your soil, even if it's just a little tiny system like that, is fantastic.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And we'll make sure we send some information about that maybe when we send out a follow-up email to our attendees tonight. Another question we've had, and I hate to keep this on Bunnings, but a lot of people have said, I've seen tomatoes for sale at Bunnings in the middle of winter, which seemed wrong. What is a good resource for knowing what to plant and when?
Gardenate, if anyone knows Gardenate, Gardenate. Gardenate, you can put in your particular where you are in the world, and it will tell you exactly what you can plant at that time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and you can either do things from seed or from seedlings. So it tells you put seeds in now, or you start the seedlings off now inside, and then you can put them outside in springtime. So that is a fantastic resource, and I use that all the time.
Yeah, well, thank you, Jackie, for sharing that as well. I'm going to definitely check that one out after this. And Greg, I mean, that pretty much sums up everything. But Greg, did you want to add anything to that? You just have to check what's around, basically, and what you should.
I would say check with your neighbors. You know, look around if they're already growing something, and then you might understand your microclimate already telling you this is a good thing. They're doing very well now. This some of the zucchinis. I might have a go at zucchinis. Oh no, the eggplants here are not happy. So maybe you avoid them. Don't do it. Don't go to a supermarket or a warehouse and check for what's available, because that stuff comes from everywhere in the country. And like in Australia, the climate that we have in Queensland right now, people going, and we have here down, like for instance in Melbourne or in Western Australia, it's completely different. So don't trust what you see in a supermarket is actually what we should be planting or eating.
Sure, that's good advice. Yep, that's great advice. I'm just going to jump to a few. I know that it's 2 minutes until 7:30. Would everyone here feel comfortable for staying on for maybe 5 to 10 more minutes? Is that okay? So I can just jump to a few questions. I'm sorry for using up all of your time plus more. But we've had some questions here just on the soil front again. Xanthi's asked, what are your thoughts on improving soil when you're only going to be there for 12 to 24 months? Is it worth it? Lots of nods.
Yeah. If you're creating, you think about the space. Sorry, Greg.
No, you go on. Go, please. Yeah.
We talked about earlier stewarding the land and creating spaces and creating soil where good bugs can thrive. If you're doing that in an area that perhaps you're maybe going to move a couple of streets away, or staying in the same broader system in which you're still going to exist. So, you know, I'm going to leave behind a couple of bottle brush bushes here. I know that I'll probably move, you know, within the area when I next move. I know that at least this property here is going to have a couple of really great pollinator attractors.
Yeah.
But yeah, growing the soil everywhere to create those pollinator and microbiome corridors for the entire area to thrive, I think is really important.
I'm just going to add to that, Anna, that's fantastic, because one of the things we got to also think is soil is actually topsoil, you know, agricultural land is disappearing on the planet in a scale that's unbelievable. So we very soon are going to have very serious issues where we're going to grow our food. It's already happening. We've been through, food chain disruptions. So there is no better thing you can do for the environment if you can, anywhere you are, to grow soil. Regardless, you're going to leave behind you, you are storing carbon. So if you think like you want to offset some of our own personal carbon footprint, I build soil, and that makes me feel like sometimes you feel paralyzed facing climate change or so much stuff going on around us. And you feel like, what can I do? I go out and I grow soil. I have a little worm farm when I can put my kitchen scraps there instead of putting in my bin that goes into a landfill that then is buried and turns into methane. So I try to do tiny, like sometimes it's really small, but it's huge. Imagine if like everyone start doing a little bit. So yeah, build soil and don't think about who's going to use that. Someone, or as Anna said, all the creatures are going to use it.
Exactly. And we have a question here that's come in somewhat recently is, I have a well-shaded west-facing undercover balcony. In setting up a garden, do you have suggestions for any extra artificial lighting needed for plants?
Mirrors work quite well, provided that you're not angling a light directly like a magnifying glass that will burn the soil. If you can get some mirrors in sort of strategic corners to kind of deflect light into an area, or even just a white panel of, maybe you can pick up a timber panel or something like that from hard rubbish and paint it white and use that to kind of just, curve the light into that area, can sometimes work well.
Oh, awesome. So that's a pretty simple solution as well, not actually requiring sort of plug-in electronic artificial light, which probably wasn't what the suggestion was, but it's where my head went, not knowing anything about it. Awesome. Is there anything, Jess or Greg, you'd like to add to that?
I would say one quick one. You would also have a look around. There's some varieties of plants that we like that actually grow better in shade environments. So sometimes it's that there's no like wrong spot. What is a wrong plant for the wrong spot. So sometimes, like you trying to grow, like I've been trying to grow a banana tree here, and terrible disaster. It's not happening. So I'm observing and like, oh, maybe it's in the wrong spot. So there are things they actually enjoy growing in the shade. Yeah, that's really handy to know too. Okay, so be careful of where you're planting.
Very small addition to Greg's thing there, sorry, that's one of the beautiful things about growing in pots, is that whenever you do have to move a property, you've got the opportunity to actually observe for the next few months and see where things do well. And if they're not doing well, you don't have to sacrifice that plant, you just move it to another spot.
Yeah,
you can
absolutely.
even do that. So stuff that doesn't love lots of summer sun, you can move that into a cooler spot during the warmer months as well.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the nice things about being a renter, is you do have that flexibility, and you're sort of, if you're forced into no-dig gardening, that's a real benefit of it. I'll ask one more question, and then I'll let everyone go. The last question is, I have newly moved where there's a large lemon tree that's dropped a lot of leaves. Will those leaves adversely affect the soil? I'll throw to Jess first.
I don't think so. I guess it depends on why it's dropping the leaves. Is it a really boggy spot? Is there something going on? Is there a disease cycle that's going on there? I don't know. I guess it depends on what's happening. You'd need to observe the space and see, is it really boggy? Is it very swampy? Is there no water? You have to understand what process is going on, I guess. I don't think so.
Yeah.
And
Anna,
no, go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead, Greg. No, it's all right. I was
think like I feel like citrus, we all love our lemons and oranges, and they are plants that have a very shallow root system. So they are very close to the surface. So sometimes it's really worth it to just like gently with your hand, just move what's underneath, because you're going to be able to see some of the roots very quickly. And sometimes there's something in the surface, the soil, that could be interfering. and making the leaves drop. Sometimes it could be a soil condition, it could be going dry too soon, or as Jess said, it could be actually a boggy spot, you know, where there's a water sitting for too long on the root system. So yeah, it's kind of like trying a few things and observe and see what the, you know, the change might happen.
Yeah. And Anna, is there any final comments on that front?
I would just mirror exactly what they both said.
Okay, awesome. Actually, one more thing, maybe. That's pretty much all we have time for tonight. Sorry, everyone. Thank you so much, Anna, Jess, Greg, for joining us tonight, and thank you for coming along. Is there like a final piece of advice? Like, if someone's going to take one thing away from this whole conversation, what would each of you recommend they take away?
Start a garden now.
Start a garden now. Yep, it's not too late. You can always start. That's true. Awesome. Jess, do you have any final words of knowledge?
I would say before you start, just go and stand in your space and pretend to be a plant. Just move around. Is it too warm? Is it too cold? What's going on here? And then just figure it out from there.
Awesome. And Anna?
Jess basically said my answer. Think like a plant. Have a look. Think like a plant and observe before you interact with your space. And then, plants are like little babies. They need water, sun, air, food. And usually if they're looking sad, it's because one of those has gone imbalanced. So just observe and start small and small.
Start slow and small, but do start. Awesome. And think like a plant or a forest. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. That is all we have time for. Thank you again, Anna, Jess, Greg. That was fantastic. I'll make sure we send out some resources to all attendees with links to your work and references that I've made tonight. That's a wrap. Thank you, everyone, again for coming, and look forward to seeing you in the future. Bye.